It will go down as one of the most important speeches or conversations that a CEO has ever had. It started the fire between Elon Musk and so many in corporate America. Bob Iger standing on stage attacking his predecessor as well as attacking Elon Musk. But today we are going to turn the tables on 1 2 shower a day Bobby. We are going to break down exactly what Bob Iger said, what was true, what was untrue. We will do so fairly and analyze it for each and every one of you to understand just how good the King of Charisma is until he's put underneath the microscope of this channel. Folks, let's get ready. We are breaking Bob. It's part 1 right now. All right, it is time to get into our very first segment, a multi-part series where we go through what Bob Iger said at the New York Times conference not long ago, and we're going to tell you what he said that was true, what was false, what was a farce, and what was, well, you know, part of being Bob. We call it Breaking Bob. Part 1 today, we're going to look at what he had to say about the Chapek situation, and then we've got so much more on the way on this channel. Don't miss it, and let's start right now. We're going to break down what's true, what's false. Folks, we call this Breaking Bob.
Oprah has called Bob one of the greatest business leaders of our time, but today, as we all know,
look at him. Look at, oh, he's confident.
A number of big
does the strong
about,
laser touch
streaming
there.
Businesses efforts to cut now
he's
more
like
than
a mini
$7 billion
Tarzan.
in costs. The activists will get into the second longest labor strike in Hollywood. AI, DeSantis, wokeism, succession.
Let's skip ahead.
Chairman of the board.
Chairman of the board
was.
And you think that that call might be asking you back.
Now, this is the question
and
about...
you say to Willa Bay, your wife, what?
Here's what he asked his wife about returning to Disney.
I was aware that Susan Arnold, the then chairman, wanted to talk to me, and I got a sense that the board was making a decision to make a change at the CEO level at Disney, and that they might ask me to step back.
And you say to her?
And I said to Willow, I'm getting this call. It's possible that I could get asked back. She immediately said, well, maybe not. Maybe she just might, they may want your advice.
All right, I want to pause there because one of the things that we've reported on is that it's our belief, and the CNBC article really put this to light, that this was heavily coordinated behind the scenes. Number one, that Bob Iger ran a shadow campaign against Bob Chapek starting in February of 2022. And then number two, that there was a rapid movement using Christine McCarthy, the CFO of the Walt Disney Company, reaching out to the institutional investors such as Vanguard and BlackRock. There was a great effort to make sure that Bob Iger would come back and replace Bob Chapek. The hoaxy folksy way that Bob Iger presents this is that he got a call from the head of the board, not from the CFO, Christine McCarthy, suggesting that they might ask him back. And he went back to his wife and said, you know, what do you think? And she's like, oh, well, you know, you really owe it to him. I was, gosh darn it, you know, you were so good to that company and grew it. And I'm here to tell you that's not the way these things work at the highest levels. Guys, what do you think? Did Bob Iger have any inkling that he was going to come back as CEO? Or was all this shadow stuff, was the 2-shower Bob issues that CNBC article talks about, was that more accurate? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Bob wanted to be back in charge from, you know, the moment he left almost. You know, I think that that's what he really truly wanted to be at. He never left. He never left his office. You know,
right.
He stayed
that's
right
exactly
where
right.
he was
Man
at.
had an office the whole time.
Yeah, he never left his office. He's been in part of the company. You know, they talk about this year where Chapek was running things. It was Bob Iger, you know, still pulling strings behind the scenes. There's nothing you can say to make me believe that this guy did not want back in that role. And, you know, now what he's doing is you're just going to point the fingers around and blame everybody but himself for the problems that he created. This is just all him trying to do damage control, you know, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I totally believe Bob wanted back in. I don't know why he ever left. I think he thought he could kind of coast on his success, you know, and live in the shadows. But, you know, when things started kind of going awry, he says, well, I got to figure this thing out somehow. I guess it's a good opportunity for me to jump back in and maybe even gain some more power. You know, who knows how he was approaching this, but there's nothing in my head that tells me that Bob Iger really wanted to retire from this. I think he wanted to
Derek, I wish one of these interviewers at some point would say, you know, if you left, why did you not give up your office with the shower?
Give up the office.
Why was that so important?
Right. Exactly.
She didn't think you were getting the call for that.
She wasn't sure. And I said, well, what if I get asked. And interesting, until maybe a day or two before, first of all, I was not seeking to return to Disney at all. And until a day or two before, I was not anticipating I ever would. And so I asked Willow, what do you think? And she said, well, they might not ask you, but if they do, she thought I had to say yes. And I asked why, and she quickly reminded me what I already knew. She said, you ran the company for over 15 years. You've been at the company, or you were at the company for almost...
Hang in there, folks. The question that's going to follow up to Bob Iger, you're going to see him be put in a position he does not like to be put in.
Yep.
Go ahead.
There's also a piece, the response that we're missing here is that Willow also bought a brand new Lexus and we needed to pay it off.
if that Lexus label is on a yacht, yes. But hang on, folks. It's about to get testy, and Iger is about to figure out that this is not totally friendly territory.
50 years, you kind of owe it to the company. If the board wants you back, because they obviously don't feel they have an alternative, at least not at that moment.
Ooh, what a terrible thing to do to Chapek.
Yes, yes. If the board that you selected.
He really
owed it to them to say yes. Yeah. Okay, it was very quick, and I realized as I heard her words, she was absolutely right.
Okay, what does she say now?
All right, let's go back, folks. Watch Iger's face on this question.
And I realized as I heard her words, she was absolutely right.
Okay, what does she say now?
Look at the downturn in the mouth. Look at the pursing on the sides of the lips. That's not a question that Bob Iger wanted to be asked. Here we go.
I haven't talked to her about it.
He's very quick. He is great at charisma. He's very quick at turning it around to a positive.
Maybe surprise you. I don't bring that much work home with me. I like to leave the job at the office when I can.
But you didn't think it was going to be like this?
In her work. No, we've had conversations about it being much more challenging than I expected. I felt that from the beginning when I came back. But I'm not daunted by it. It's just...
Now, what I want to bring up here, guys, is that everything that Disney is suffering from right now is a consequence of what Bob Iger did. The highest value the stock ever had was under Bob Chapek, and it was not just as soon as Bob Iger left. So it's not as if Bob Chapek inherited such a thing. Bob Chapek came in February of 2020 at a time when the COOF looked like it was going to take down the entire company, and Bob Iger wanted out to preserve his legacy. Funny how that works. A year later, Chapek, who was supposed to be the fall guy, he was supposed to be the guy who failed, did not fail at all. And this caused quite the scramble inside the company because Bob Chapek didn't hold the right political viewpoints for a person who was surprisingly successful. And so, does anybody here on the panel, we talked about this last night, but does anyone here on the panel know the first movie that will come out from the Disney company that was greenlit under Bob Chapek?
The Deadpool.
Correct. Deadpool 3. So everything that we have seen so far that has destroyed Disney started under Bob Iger. And that's the gestational period that these movies and films and shows take when you're a Walt Disney company. So note that when he's talking about these problems he didn't know were this big and this bad, the company didn't start dropping stock stock value until he spoke out about the legislation in Florida. That was when the shadow campaign began. And at that point, the Disney stock was somewhere around $160 per share. Today it's in the 90s. It's all because of Iger.
Just a lot more work, nor is she daunted on my behalf.
You said that you didn't want to come back, but there's been a lot of reporting that you never really wanted to leave. And even people now say, well, is he really going to leave in 2 years from now again? That you were frustrated. You were frustrated with Bob Chapek.
That reporting is completely inaccurate. Completely. I had been CEO for about 15 years. I said I started the company in 1974 at ABC. It had been around a long time. There were plenty of things in the world that I was interested in that I either wanted to do or wanted to learn more about. I had not really had a day off, and I don't even remember. And I was thoroughly enthusiastic.
But you were frustrated.
I felt that.
Let's pause here, and I just want to bring up the fact that Bob Iger never left the company, and that Bob Iger will not leave the company in 2 years. That's something also that is not disclosed. But Bob Iger has in his contract that he will continue to be a consultant and continue to have an office with the C-suite into the 2030s. Paul, Derek, any thoughts on Bob Iger and the fact that the media just never really discloses that Iger will never leave this company, and it's written into his contract?
Well, again,
They're running cover like they always do. They just want to, you know, make it seem like Bob Iger is the true hero in this whole story. When, you know, he's the villain. He's the guy that started it all. He's the guy that led Disney into this mess. And then he threw Bob Chapek under the bus to get out of this mess. And now he can come back as the conquering hero. That's basically the story that Bob Iger is trying to write. The media is helping him write it. And at the end of the day, nobody's buying it. You know, we see what's happening.
Derek, it's almost like while you're talking, this made me realize something. It's almost like the more he talks, what's your reaction to this? The more he talks bad about and the more he dumps on Chapek, the better he himself is able to make himself look, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
At the same time, Bob Chapek had what, 4 months of non-contested time as CEO?
Yeah, I mean, Bob Iger was breathing down his neck, looking over his shoulder, a part of his Disney CEO, you know, reign. He was just as much a part of Bob Chapek's career as he was of his own. So Bob Iger is trying to disassociate himself from Disney and say, you know, during that time that Bob Chapek, oh, that was just Bob. That was just Chapek. That had nothing to do with me. That was just Bob Chapek, and now all of that mess is on him, even though he was intricately tied into the company and everything. Like you said, the first film that's getting greenlit is coming next year by Bob Chapek. You know, again, Bob Iger is turning over in his, you know, sleep, trying to figure out how he's going to unwind himself from the mess that Disney's created. And all he's doing is just throwing everybody under the bus. He's taking zero ownership of any of this. And that's the biggest issue I have with this, because
I think others are catching on to that, Derek.
I liken this to sports. When you have a good leader in sports, you have a good coach. What does that coach do when he wins? You know, he gives credit to everybody else. Let me give my credit to the assistant coaches. I'll give my credit to my coordinators, the team, the quarterback, the defense. That's who he gives the credit to. You know, it's not about me. It's about these guys. These are the guys that got the job done. But what does he do when things are wrong and it's a loss and they didn't expect it? Hey, that's on me. That's on me. That's my fault. Okay.
He takes
ownership of the loss, but he gives credits for the wins. Bob Iger's doing the exact reverse. He's taking credit for everything that they did right. And then if he does something wrong, oh, yeah, you got to talk to Bob Chapek about that. That's not me. I wasn't even here. You know, like that's how he's acting. It's like, come on, man. You know, be a CEO, you know. And I have a video coming out. It's called The Chief Excuse Officer, because that's exactly who Bob Iger is right now. That's who he is. He's the Chief Excuse Officer, not the Chief Executive Officer. So, yeah, this is the issue right now with Bob Iger, is that he doesn't want to own the loss. And sometimes you just got to take the L and move on.
When we get to the Bob Chapek section, I want to ask you guys about that, because I think it really does speak to his character. Let's listen in.
And I had accomplished so much during my former tenure, including opening the Disneyland in Shanghai.
In case you all wonder what he's most proud of, it's the first thing he said. It's the Shanghai park. It's his version of what Walt did in Florida. And he's so naive that he doesn't understand the dangers of it.
And going into the streaming business very successfully.
Disney Plus has never turned a profit in the entire existence of the streaming service, and it will take probably a decade in a best case scenario to ever get out of the hole.
And it wasn't about being bored. It wasn't about, you know, lack of challenge. It was just the time was ready.
But it's fair to say you were frustrated. You were watching this company.
Remember, folks, Iger left the company as the pandemic was setting in, and as they all thought that the company was going to collapse, as the theme parks were going to have to close, and nobody knew for how long. Folks couldn't go to the box office for the movies, and there was no guarantee at that point that Disney Plus was ever going to work. That's when Chapek came in. That's why Iger left when he did.
I was frustrated about what?
Meaning from the outside. On the outside. You're now out.
You were asking me about whether you ever wanted to leave in the beginning. The answer is I did, which is why I left.
Okay.
He left as the pandemic started.
Okay, but now you're on the outside.
Right.
And you're watching.
Busy, doing other things.
Doing other things, but Bob Chapek's in that role.
Yes.
And you were thinking what?
I was disappointed in what I was seeing, both during the transition period when I was still there and while I was out. But I really worked hard at distancing myself from it.
All right. So, what exactly do you guys think that he was disappointed in? Just out of curiosity, what could he have possibly been disappointed in? Because when I look at how things were going, you can see this is the Bob Chapek years. This is the Bob Chapek time over here. That's not exactly how things were going for Iger when we're back down here. So I'm not getting the I'm not getting what it is that he was disappointed with. What do you guys think?
Wow.
I think he was. Oh, go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
No,
go
no,
ahead.
I have a really difficult time getting my head around that.
I think he was disappointed in the fact that Chapek said, hey, we're not going to talk about this, you know, parental rights and education situation. I think that was one thing that he was disappointed in. And he wanted Chapek to take some sort of a stand on it with all the employees that were barking about it inside his company.
See, I think that was just the vehicle to get rid of Chapek. I think they were waiting to find a way to do it, and that was the one they said he won't know, he won't be able to handle this. Watch what we do.
Right. But that's where I think this whole thing kind of, well, that was when they decided, you know what, let's get Bob back in here. Let's get Iger back in, I should say. Yep. I think that's when they made that decision. But yeah, before that, everything was doing just fine because Chapek, he understood, hey, I just got to make money and everything will be just fine. So let's, you know, make money. Let's go out there and let's put out good content and, you know, let's get these parks right. And I think at this point, I think Bob Iger felt like, you know what? I can step in and do the job that he's doing, but he's not pushing the narrative that we need to push in this company. He's not pushing that. And that's why I think they stepped in and got rid of him.
Well said.
Because one, I couldn't do anything about it. In a way, it wasn't my business.
He couldn't stop them from gaining all the way to being $200 per share. It was a terrible thing, folks. Terrible.
At all, really. It was his business to run. And I was not happy with what I was seeing. I worked hard to build the company into what it was.
The only thing he could be frustrated about is the ideological direction of the company, and you see what he wants today.
Yeah. Over that long period of time, I was proud of those. I was proud of those accomplishments. It hurts when something that you've put your heart and soul into, and that you care about so much, is going through a difficult time.
Okay, Mike, what has been the low that we've seen in the last few months from the Disney company in terms of the shareholder price?
Oh, in the 70s.
Yeah. Bob must be, he must really be hurting. Did you hear what he just said?
Yeah. This guy this is such absolute full of crapness. I hadn't seen this part of the tape yet. I hadn't seen.
Well, listen again, Mike, and hear the suffering that Bob Iger is going through as this company has fallen under him.
When something that you've put your heart and soul into, and that you care about so much, is going through a difficult time.
Okay, so I mean, since
right there, what he's talking about is the past year.
Yeah.
Right.
65% drop in the total value of the company, Mike.
Right. He's talking about the past year. He's not talking about anything else.
Yeah, 60. I mean, you're talking about a company that has dropped more than half of its total value as a direct result of Bob Iger taking out Bob Chapek.
So let's then talk about successions, because there's a lot of people in this room, business leaders, who have to think about their own succession, other types of succession. What was your mistake then? To the degree you think that Bob Chapek was a mistake, and I assume you imagine it's maybe one of your biggest.
It's a great question because he fishes out confirmation of something that's more salacious than Iger would have otherwise said. And a younger Iger would have sniffed that out and would have avoided it.
Well, first of all, I'm not the only one that may have considered it a mistake.
And instead, so you see the hands out, that body posture says, this is something I don't want to deal with.
You see what I'm talking about? He don't want to take the rap. He don't want to take the rap. So I'm not the only person that saw this. He does not want to take ownership of he's the one that's supposed to set up the succession plan, right? He's the CEO. He should be getting his successor. Oh, I'm not the only person that saw this as a mistake. Well, I mean, again, why don't you just say, you know what? I have to own that. I have to own that. That's my fault. If he picked a bad guy, you picked a bad guy, Bob. Just say you picked a bad guy.
But he doesn't want to own. When he lifts his when he lifts his hands, and I want everybody to watch it again. When he lifts his hands, when I was watching this live, I thought where he was going with it was, I don't want to say anything bad about somebody who was, who held this job. It's a hard job. There's like a way to do that. And instead of saying that, instead of doing the cordial thing, and being classy, he instead says, "Oh, well, I wasn't the only one." Watch this.
It's maybe one of your biggest.
Well, first of all, I'm not the only one that may have considered it a mistake.
Funny.
The board obviously had its issues with Bob,
but you knew him well.
The board, we have heard, and this has been reported multiple times, the board would not have sacked Chapek unless Iger had agreed to return.
Tried really. He worked for me for quite a long time. I've tried hard to conduct my own post-mortem.
You'll notice they never say what it is that Chapek did that was wrong. because
Poor Chapek. All he did is run up the stock price up to 170 some odd, 180.
200, 202, $203 was the max. Yeah. And we're not feeling bad for Bob Chapek, other than he's been thrown under the bus and is probably under
wait a
NDA.
second.
He owns his own islands, probably.
But,
Yes,
well, listen, what a weird thing that Iger said. I attempted to run my own post-mortem on the whole Chapek thing. Now, obviously, I'm paraphrasing. Well, why would he be doing it?
That's a great question.
It's such a silly thing to say. Well, I wanted to figure out why the whole Chapek thing that I was part of fell off the rails.
It's like Brute. It's like Brute
Weird.
running
What a weird
post-mortem.
Let me translate for you. Here's what Bob Iger's saying. I was trying to understand why this guy that I thought was going to be a puppet and do exactly what the heck I wanted wasn't actually doing exactly what I wanted and was actually steering the company into better waters.
So what he really means is he's Putin, and he thought Chapek was going to be Medvedev and just be president for 2 years.
Yep.
So
Yes.
Putin could
he was going to fail. Yes.
Putin could legally come back and run for president once more.
And instead, what we've got is, it's like after Caesar falls, the guys who decided to betray him all saying, "All right, who's ready to do an analysis of how this guy died?"
And
like,
really,
I think it's necessary.
It's shocking that Chapek has fallen off the planet.
Well, he's under an NDA, non-compete, I'm sure.
Oh, he has been compensated handsomely to disappear.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
that's why we call it the Chapek Archipelago, somewhere out in the Pacific.
Absolutely, somewhere. Yes,
that's right.
Yeah.
Just so that we as a company don't do it again. What do we do?
Do what again, Bob? Hit $200 per share?
Wrong. And we've discovered certain things that perhaps we could have done better, but
like making
go back
good content.
To DeSantis and try to undo the mess that you made.
Make friends with conservatives and moderates. That'd be a good thing.
He almost did it. I think Chapek almost did manage to go back to DeSantis and have him undo.
DeSantis confirmed that there were talks happening behind the scenes.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today, but part 2 is coming out soon. We'll be talking about Iger and his stumbling, where he did not know exactly how to answer some of those excellent questions from the moderator of that event. All right. If you like this one, click the like button, share, subscribe, and when you click it, you stick it to the algorithms. It's the notification bell. The more you like this one, the more the next one can grow, and the more you can show this video to everybody on YouTube. We surely do appreciate it. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.